Hey guys, tonight we dive into a dusty, half-forgotten hallway of human history, one where job titles are both baffling and frankly a little tragic. Imagine this, flickering candlelight, the thick scent of lavender oil and body odor mingling in the air, and behind a gilded door. Someone waits for you, not because you're noble, not because you're wise, but because you, lucky you, are the royal corset loosener. You probably won't survive this career path with your dignity intact. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, I'd love to know, where are you watching from and what time is it there right now? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through the cold stone corridor of the 18th century palace, candle in hand, heart heavy with the knowledge that somewhere, upstairs, a duchess is struggling to breathe. Her corset's laces are pulled so tight, it's a wonder she's still upright. And who is summoned when breathing becomes optional? You. You were once a tailor's apprentice, proud of your neat stitches and steady hands. Now you kneel at the foot of a gilded settee, fingers fumbling with dampened silk ribbons and whalebone stays, while the lady above you wheezes like an asthmatic bellows. Yes, you are the royal corset loosener. Your role, not to advise, not to design, merely to untie. Corsets, at the height of their tyranny, were not simple garments. They were feats of pressure engineering. The goal: reshape the human body. Women were expected to cinch their waists down to sizes that wouldn't fit most toddler pants today. Breathing, optional. Fainting, expected. Eating, risky. It wasn't uncommon for aristocratic women to skip meals entirely, because once you're tied into 30 feet of reinforced silk and bone, a single grape feels like a 3-course meal. Now here's the real kicker. You'd think ladies in waiting would handle this intimate task, but in some royal courts, the act of loosening a corset, especially after a formal appearance, was assigned to a male servant. Why? That remains hazy. Some suggest it was a power dynamic. Servants meant to be invisible, hands always occupied but eyes forever cast downward. Others say it was about hierarchy and trust, and possibly the prevention of gossip. After all, what better way to avoid rumors than by assigning the job to someone who knows they'll be punished severely for speaking? One French court record lists a lace gentleman whose duties included the gentle release of her grace's stays and the disposal of soaked linen. So not only did you untie sweaty corsets, you also carried away what was essentially a royal sweat rag. Glamorous. You're often called in after formal events. Masked balls, state dinners, public strolls. The corset has done its duty, presenting an illusion of delicate femininity. Now, it's your job to unravel it without tugging too hard. Because if you do, and a lace snaps or heaven forbid, a seam tears, you might find yourself reassigned, possibly to rat catching or the kitchen, or nowhere at all. The job had its quirks. Imagine loosening a corset while the Duchess lectures you about foreign diplomacy or her thoughts on Mozart's latest opera. You're kneeling, hands deep in brocade, while she debates the future of Prussia. And heaven help you if she falls asleep before you finish. Yes, that happened. One account from a Bavarian court diary tells of a lady who passed out mid-loosening, leaving the unfortunate servant stuck kneeling for 4 hours, waiting for her to wake. Here's a fun historical tidbit. Whalebone wasn't actually bone. It was baleen, a flexible keratin material from inside a whale's mouth. Baleen allowed for just enough bend to mold the torso without snapping, making it the go-to material for corsets. Corsets were sometimes lined with scented paper, meant to mask the inevitable body scent. Spoiler, it didn't work. But the royal corset loosener's woes didn't end with untying knots. No, some were tasked with relacing the next day. That meant pulling those same damp, slightly sour-smelling stays back into place and cinching until your fingers ached. There's a reason these men had strong hands and, reportedly, short tempers. Historians still argue whether the position was ever formalized with an official title, or if it was just a poor valet with an unlucky task rotation. Some insist corset loosener was a known role in certain courts, while others claim it's a modern exaggeration of broader servant duties. Still, the stories remain, quietly preserved in servant journals, court inventories, and letters between scandalous cousins. A few even suggest that one corset loosener became so adept at his job that he was promoted to royal dresser, eventually choosing fabrics for the queen herself. Now that is what we call upward mobility. But tonight, you're still kneeling. You hear the sigh of relief as the final lace is undone, the sigh of a woman finally able to inhale past her ribs. She says nothing, just a faint nod. You bow, scoop up the linens, and leave, your presence barely acknowledged. You're invisible again, slipping back into the shadows of history, and yet, centuries later, here we are. Remembering you step outside into the cool air, but the memory of stale perfume and crushed velvet lingers in your nose. You'd think the worst is over, but no. Tonight, your path winds even deeper into history's most fragrant corners. You walk down a narrow cobbled street in Tudor England, sidestepping puddles you hope are just water. And you stop when you hear it, the slosh of a wooden bucket, the scrape of a shovel, and the unmistakable scent of human waste thick in the midnight air. You've arrived at the world of the gong farmer. There's no glamour here, no silk corsets or powdered wigs, just filth, darkness, and a profession that makes the royal corset loosener look like an Instagram influencer. Your job tonight, clean out the cesspits beneath the city, because someone has to. You light your lantern and descend into a pit that was once a source of pride for a homeowner, a privy, an outhouse, a personal throne room, but now it's filled with decades of layered, fermented misery. And tonight, you're the one scooping it out. The term gong farmer might sound almost whimsical, like someone tending enchanted gongs in a misty temple, but no, gong was the slang for human waste, and farming meant harvesting it from cesspits using hand tools, buckets, and sheer willpower. You lower your shovel, hear the thick plop, and try not to gag. The Tudor diet, rich in meat pies and suspiciously unrefrigerated ale, has left its mark here. You work at night not because you prefer the quiet, but because the stench is so overpowering that it's forbidden to do this job during daylight. City ordinances required gong farmers to operate only after dark and to cart their foul bounty far, far outside the city walls. You wear thick leather gloves, if you're lucky, and a scarf over your nose, if you're wise, but neither does much. The smell becomes part of your skin, part of your clothes, part of your very soul. It's a solitary job, mostly. But now and then a curious rat scampers too close and you lunge at it with your shovel, more out of spite than fear. After all, you've both made your peace with the filth. You just happen to be on opposing teams. Despite the odor, the risk, and the indignity, gong farmers were paid relatively well for their time, especially compared to other laborers. It was danger pay in a way. You could make the equivalent of a few months' wages in just a couple of weeks of work. But you earned it with every lungful of methane and every pit that threatened to cave in. And yes, that's a real hazard. Cesspits were notoriously unstable. Too much digging in the wrong spot, and the walls could collapse, burying you in a tomb of someone else's digestive history. One grim tale speaks of a gong farmer who vanished mid-shovel, never to be seen again. Only the tip of his bucket remained, bobbing gently on the surface. Historians still argue whether that story is a warning, a fable, or horribly true. But beyond the grossness lies something oddly satisfying. You finish clearing a pit, and for a brief moment, you're the most appreciated man in town. Not publicly, of course. No one throws a parade for the poop guy, but households sleep easier, privies become usable again, and the city flows just a little cleaner for a little while. As you haul your cart through the sleeping streets, you notice a strange silence. It's not peaceful. It's thick, like the town is holding its breath until you're gone. No one thanks you. No one meets your eyes. You are essential and invisible, heroic and unwanted. Still, your cargo doesn't go to waste. In fact, waste was currency. Once outside the city, the contents of your buckets are dumped into large vats, stirred, dried, and resold as fertilizer. Yes, Tudor vegetables were often grown with yesterday's stew. You might call it the circle of life, or the recycling program of nightmares. Now here's a quirky fact for your troubles. Gong farmers had to register their tools with city officials. There were actual records of who owned which shovels to prevent people from just randomly digging around in the city's underbelly. Because that was a thing. Some tried to sneak into cesspits to retrieve lost jewelry, coins, or even bodies. Yes, bodies, from the sludge. By the late 1600s, the profession began to die out, replaced by more centralized sewage systems and the rise of the water closet. But for centuries, these men were the silent, stinking saviors of every city. So tonight, as you trudge your wheelbarrow of horrors out past the city gates, take a moment to inhale, just not too deeply. The stars are out, the moon is high, and somewhere, far behind you, someone flushes a chamber pot, unknowingly launching tomorrow's shift. You wipe your brow, flick away a stray drop of something, and keep walking. Sleep tight, hero. You've earned it. You wake before dawn, ears still ringing from last night's symphony of sloshes and sighs. But there's no rest yet. Because today, you're putting on your best tunic and heading to a wake, not to mourn, but to feast. Not for your hunger, but for someone else's sins. You are a sin-eater, and your breakfast today is a slice of bread, a mug of ale, and someone else's eternal baggage. This job is perhaps the strangest combination of spiritual and culinary in all of history. You walk into quiet stone cottages where the air still smells like candle wax and rosemary, traditional herbs for the dying, and the grieving family looks at you like you're both holy and haunting. You're not clergy, you're not family, you're the paid stranger who eats the sins off their loved one's soul. The ritual is simple, unsettling, and very much not approved by the church. A piece of bread is placed on the chest of the recently deceased. Sometimes it's blessed. Sometimes it's just damp from tears. You recite a prayer, words handed down orally, often in whispers, never in writing. Then you take the bread, eat it, and sip the ale or wine offered with it. You've just symbolically transferred their sins into your own body. Congratulations, you're now morally bloated, and you get paid, usually in coins, sometimes in food, never in kindness. People believe you've just taken on Uncle Jeffrey's gambling, his lying, his other unspoken habits. You're like a walking dumpster of guilt. Sin-eating was most commonly practiced in rural parts of Wales and the English borderlands from the 17th to the early 19th century, especially in communities where access to priests was rare, or where people still clung to older, folk traditions. And while the church scowled in public, it often looked the other way, because who else was going to handle last-minute sins when the priest was 6 towns over and the body was cooling fast? You step outside, chewing slowly, wondering whose secrets you just swallowed. Some historians say sin-eaters were often the poorest of the poor, outcasts, beggars, or those already deemed morally suspect. You were never invited to dinner. You were never hugged. Children ran from you in the street. You were, in a way, the human embodiment of a guilty conscience. But others argue the opposite, that sin-eaters had a respected, if uneasy, role in their communities. They might be feared, yes, but also needed, revered, paid, invited into sacred spaces. Historians still argue whether the sin-eater was viewed more as a scapegoat or a sacred figure. There are few surviving records of actual sin-eaters, but we know of one famous name, Richard Munslow, who died in 1906 in Shropshire. He was known locally as the last sin-eater in England. Interestingly, he wasn't a pauper or an outcast. He was a well-off farmer who took on the role to revive the old tradition after the loss of his own children. That, right there, adds layers to the story you're now a part of. As you walk home, you feel full, but not in the comforting way. There's a heaviness in your gut, not from the bread, but from the thought that you're carrying pieces of people, regrets, wrongs, whispers, that you'll never know, and you'll do it again tomorrow, or the next day, because dying, much like gossip, never takes a holiday. Here's an odd little fringe fact. In some remote villages, sin-eaters were also believed to have psychic sensitivities. After all, if you're walking around with a stomach full of sins, People figure you might be able to talk to ghosts, too. There were whispers of sin-eaters who predicted deaths, saw spirits, or refused certain meals because they were too sinful to eat. Whether true or just village myth, you're not sure. But you do avoid that one cottage on the hill. No one goes there twice. Your clothes are simple, your reputation is complicated, and your job utterly irreplaceable. You are a living ritual, old magic in a fading world. There's no retirement plan, no legacy, only the knowledge that thanks to you, someone might enter the afterlife a little lighter. You return to your cottage, wash your hands in cold water and stare at the single candle flickering on your table. You could light another, but you won't. You sit, lean back and exhale. Bread, wine, and sins. It's a heavy sleep waiting for you tonight. You sleep like someone who's eaten the weight of the world, which technically you did. But before your dreams can settle too deep, you're up again. Because now you've taken on a job that's louder, leaner, and just a bit pokier. This time you're armed not with a shovel or stale bread, but with a long stick and impeccable timing. You are a knocker-up, the human alarm clock in a world without snooze buttons. You move through foggy cobblestone streets in pre-dawn silence. The only sound is the occasional drip from a leaking gutter and the quiet thud of your boots. Factories loom in the distance, their smokestacks still asleep, but not for long, because it's your job to wake the workers before the machines do, and you don't knock on doors. That would be too polite. You raise your stick, a long hollow cane or bamboo pole, and start tapping on the second or third story window of your first customer. Lightly at first, then firmer. You wait until you see movement, a grumpy face behind glass, a lifted hand, sometimes just the twitch of a curtain. Confirmation. One worker successfully awakened. No alarm, no bell, just you and your stick. In working-class Britain, especially during the Industrial Revolution, alarm clocks were unreliable, expensive, or simply non-existent. People had to wake up before sunrise to get to factories, docks, or coal mines, often in shifts that started at 5 or 6 a.m. And missing a shift wasn't just an inconvenience, it could mean lost wages or even dismissal. So who did they rely on? You. Some knockers-up used pea shooters instead of sticks, aiming carefully at windows to make a sharp ping on the glass. Skilled ones could hit the same window every morning, same spot, without waking the entire neighborhood. A precise art. Slightly annoying, mildly heroic. You probably think this job wouldn't have lasted long. But no, knocker-upping, yes, that's the actual verb, was common in parts of England and Ireland well into the mid-20th century. Some towns had official knockers employed by local factories. Others were freelancers, paid a few pence a week per household. It was often a side gig for elderly folks or women with early rising husbands. You know, people already awake, with nothing better to do than poke sleeping strangers. Your day, or rather, your night, starts around 3:30 a.m. You check your list, pull on your scarf, and step out into the mist. Some clients want gentle tapping. Others request more aggressive rapping. One man, a baker, insists you sing. You try not to take that personally. You start to know your customers by habit. The woman who waves without looking. The boy who scowls but always thanks you. The man who refuses to respond at all until you've rapped out the first 4 notes of God Save the Queen. You do it, of course. Customer service. Historians still argue whether knocker-ups were phased out by technology or by rising wages that made alarm clocks affordable. Some say they lingered longer in rural areas out of tradition rather than necessity. But everyone agrees on this. They were a unique slice of human ingenuity, bridging the gap between candlelight and electricity, muscle work and machinery. And here's a strange tidbit. Some knockers-up had to be woken up themselves by other knockers. It created a sort of reverse pyramid scheme of poking. The earliest riser would tap the next one, who would then begin their rounds. A sleepy little network of responsibility. You stop under a window and look up. No curtains twitch. You tap again. Nothing. You sigh. One more knock, a little louder. Finally, movement. A face, bleary-eyed and ungrateful. You tip your cap. Another victory. You don't expect thank yous. Sometimes you get cursed at. Once, someone dumped chamber pot water on you. You suspect it wasn't by accident. But still, you show up, because there's something oddly noble about helping strangers rise to meet another grinding day. You wrap your route as the first orange light spills across the rooftops. The chimneys stir, the city yawns. Your job is done. While others are just waking, you're heading home. The irony doesn't escape you. You've spent the entire morning making sure people don't oversleep, and now you get to collapse into bed, just as the world begins spinning again. A soft rain begins to fall as you walk back. You tuck your stick under one arm, count the coins jingling in your coat pocket, and yawn. It's been a good shift. Only one no-show, only one broken window. Not bad, really. You reach your stoop, fish out the key, and glance up at your own window. Empty. Quiet. No one to knock for you. You'll be fine. You always are. You climb into bed, the city already humming, factory whistles, horse hooves, footsteps. But none of it wakes you, because when it comes to sleep, you never hit snooze. You are the snooze. Your dreams are still echoing with tapping when you jolt awake, not because someone knocked, but because something squeaked, loudly, close, and persistently. You sit up in the dark, and there it is again. A sharp skitter, a wet rustle, a quick little gnaw. You already know what this job is. You sigh, tie your boots, and grab your sack. Tonight, you're a rat catcher, and the city is one giant scratching box. The rats come in waves, like tiny furry tides that recede only when you start stomping. It's the 1700s, or maybe the 1800s. Honestly, it doesn't matter. Rats are timeless, and they're everywhere. Beneath the floorboards, behind the bakery, inside the walls of hospitals and manor homes, they gnaw through grain sacks, spread disease, and reproduce with the efficiency of, well, rats. You're the solution, sort of. Your tools, a burlap sack, a short stick, and maybe, if you're fancy, a ferret or a terrier. Yes, trained animals were your best co-workers. Ferrets chased rats into corners, dogs snapped them up mid-scamper. You grabbed them, with your hands, or more accurately, your reflexes and a slightly worrying lack of fear. London especially had no shortage of work for you. The city hummed with life and refuse, the perfect buffet for rodents. The deeper the tunnels, the thicker the squeaks. You'd make your way through marketplaces and docks, offering your services like a walking pest control ad. Got rats, I eat rats for breakfast. You'd boast, mostly metaphorical. Hopefully, rat catchers weren't just helpful, they were vital. The Black Death was still fresh in cultural memory, and while the science was fuzzy, people knew rats were bad news. If someone saw a rodent scurry across their pantry, they didn't grab a broom, they grabbed you. But here's where it gets weird. Some rat catchers didn't just kill the rats, they sold them. That's right. In a bizarre twist of entrepreneurship, rats were caught alive and resold for blood sport. Tavern owners or traveling performers would pay for live rats to be used in rat baiting matches, an event where dogs competed to kill the most rats in a set time. It was gruesome, messy, and wildly popular. Think of it as the terrible cousin of modern entertainment. You, the rat catcher, made more money selling rats than removing them. It created a delightful little ethical dilemma. Do you really want to solve the rat problem or just manage the inventory? Historians still argue whether rat catchers were truly effective in lowering city infestations or if they were more symbolic, a kind of public reassurance that someone somewhere was dealing with the squeaky plague. Some accounts describe homes being cleared multiple times a month with no real reduction in rodent traffic. Suspicious, yes. Profitable? Absolutely. One of the most famous rat catchers was Jack Black. No, not the actor, but the self-declared rat catcher to Her Majesty Queen Victoria. He wore a top hat, a green waistcoat, and a belt full of live rats. Because fashion. He claimed he could tame them, breed color varieties, and even sold them as pets to ladies who kept them in tiny cages. You imagine him now, proudly strutting through the streets like the rodent Pied Piper. Confidence goes a long way. You yourself aren't quite so flamboyant. You crouch low in an alley, eyes scanning the shadows. You've learned the rat's mind. You know they dart along walls, avoid open spaces, and pause, just briefly, before crossing a floorboard gap. That's your moment. You pounce, bag open, hands quick. Tonight's haul: 6 rats, 1 weasel, not yours, and a coin purse someone else dropped. Bonus: you get bitten sometimes. It's part of the job. You rub garlic or spirits into the wound and mutter a few creative curses. You've heard of rat catchers who lost fingers, even eyes. Some believed rat bites gave you strange dreams. You haven't told anyone about the one where the rats talk politics. Probably nothing. You return home with a full sack and a few orders from the tavern. You'll feed the dogs, make your coins, and sleep soundly if the squeaking in your walls doesn't keep you up. Odd little tidbit: in some towns, rat catchers were required to register their animals. There were even competitions: who caught the biggest rat, or who cleared the most in 1 hour. You always lost to the kid with the one-eyed ferret. Cheater, but you're proud. Your job is dirty, yes, dangerous, definitely, but necessary. Without you, the city would collapse into a sea of whiskers and squeals. You hang your bag, toss a crust of bread to your dog, and lay back on your straw mattress. Tomorrow, someone else will scream from behind a cupboard. And you'll answer the call, sack in hand, ready to chase shadows with claws. Your dreams are oddly twitchy, full of tails and teeth, so when you finally surface from sleep, it's no surprise that your first thought is marshes, wet, cold, ankle-deep marshes, because today, you're off to collect leeches. Yes, you are now a leech collector, and your breakfast is fear and bog water. You trudge into the morning mist, hem of your coat already damp from dew. The marsh is quiet, deceptively peaceful. But beneath that muddy water, tiny wriggling bloodsuckers waiting for a snack. And unfortunately, that snack is you. Leeches weren't just gross little swamp noodles. They were medicine. At least, that's what everyone believed. From the Middle Ages through the 19th century, leeches were considered the ultimate health tool. Got a fever? Leeches. Swollen joints? Leeches. Random sadness because the moon looked at you funny? Leeches. Doctors prescribed them by the dozen, sometimes hundreds, to suck out bad humors, so someone had to find them. Someone with tough skin, questionable judgment, and a solid set of boots, or no boots at all. Because, and here comes the fun part, leeches are best collected by walking barefoot through shallow marshes and letting them attach to your legs. You stand there, motionless, while they latch on like clingy toddlers in a buffet line. Then, when they've had their fill, or sooner if you're impatient, you peel them off and plop them into your collection jar. Congratulations, you're the blood bank. You carry around a tin or wooden box filled with damp moss to keep them fresh and happy. Sometimes you sing to them. You tell yourself it's for morale, but really, it's to distract you from the slow sensation of being drained by squishy vampires. Leech collecting was dangerous work, not just because of the blood loss, though that was a thing. You could faint in the swamp. Infection was common. And let's not forget about leeches that climbed too high. If you've never yanked one off your thigh in a panic while standing knee-deep in mud, have you even lived? In parts of rural England, Ireland, and the Baltics, this was women's work. Entire generations of women supported their families by wading into swamps and emerging dizzy but successful. They'd sell their haul to apothecaries, barbers, yes, barbers were once surgeons, remind me to never get a haircut in the 1700s, and hospitals. A healthy leech was worth good money, especially the big ones, fat, wriggly, juicy. The kind of thing no one wants to find in their bath, but every doctor wanted in his toolkit. Historians still argue whether leech therapy actually helped anyone, or if it just made people lightheaded enough to think they were improving. Some say it reduced blood pressure or cleaned wounds. Others insist it was a case of medieval placebo. Either way, demand was real. By the 19th century, Europe was importing millions of leeches from Asia and the Middle East because native supplies couldn't keep up. That's right. There were leech shortages, and yes, that's a sentence I never thought I'd write. You get creative in your hunting. Sometimes you stir the water with a stick to agitate the leeches. Other times you bring along an animal, say a goat or a cow, and lead them into the marsh ahead of you. Let them take the first bites. You stand nearby with your jar, waiting to scoop up the satisfied suckers. Ethical? Debatable. Efficient. Very. There's a grim little story about a collector who bled so slowly over the years that she grew pale and weak, always dizzy, always cold. They say she died with leeches still wriggling in her collecting bucket, unaware that their most loyal host had taken her final nap. Probably apocryphal, but you still eat extra porridge in the morning, just in case. By noon, you've got a respectable jar full. They stick to the sides like wet punctuation marks, slimy and self-satisfied. You cork the jar, scribble the count on a piece of cloth, and set off toward town. You smell like marsh water, blood, and something vaguely fishy. The apothecary doesn't mind. He buys the lot, nods once, and says nothing. He never does. Odd little fringe fact. Some high society women kept ornamental leeches as health pets in glass globes. They'd let them feed once a week, claiming it kept their skin pale and their nerves calm. You wonder if any of them ever waded barefoot into a bog. Probably not. You return home, calves bandaged, coins jingling faintly in your pouch. You sit on a wooden stool, sip lukewarm tea, and stare at the soft red marks crawling up your legs. Little thank you kisses from your tiny, ungrateful co-workers. The world is cleaner now. Hospitals prefer antiseptic to annelids. But in your time, when the doctor's go-to remedy was bleed it out, you were indispensable. And maybe just a little bit brave, or crazy, or both. You lie back, feeling your pulse slow just slightly. Maybe from fatigue, maybe from anemia. Either way, you did your part. You wake to the smell of something warm and metallic like iron and wood smoke. Your legs ache and your hands are blistered, but no rest for the weary. Today, you're heading down into the belly of the city. Today, you are a matchstick maker, and your lungs are about to hate you. You wrap a scarf around your nose and mouth, though it won't help much. The room you work in is poorly ventilated and always smells like rot and chemicals. A single window is painted shut. Your job, coating tiny wooden sticks with a delicate mixture of phosphorus and potassium chlorate, just the right amount. Too little, and the match won't light. Too much, and you'll lose your eyebrows. But that's not the real danger. You work with white phosphorus, the glowing, ghostly kind that sticks to skin and burns straight through it. When it enters your body through your fingertips or when you accidentally lick your thumb to count matches faster, it starts to eat away at your jawbone. Quietly. Painfully. They call it phossy jaw. A sickly, sweet-smelling rot that leaves your face swollen and your teeth loose. Your breath glows in the dark. Your mouth aches constantly. And the factory foreman? He tells you to chew parsley and work through it. The pay is terrible, but you're fast. Your fingers move in a blur. Dip, press, stack, dip again. The splinters jam under your nails, and the chemical dust sticks to your skin like sugar. No gloves, no breaks. You're paid by the piece, not by the hour. Fall behind, and you go hungry. Work too fast, and your hands turn yellow from phosphorus poisoning. You sit shoulder to shoulder with other girls and women, some as young as 8, all coughing, all pale. One of them, Mary, hasn't smiled in days. You ask if she's all right. She just shrugs, her lips cracked and peeling. She lost a tooth this morning. She'll lose another before the week is out. There's an unspoken competition in the room. Who can stack the most boxes, dip the most matches, stay the most silent? Management watches from the shadows. Talk too much and you're fired. Complain and you're labeled a troublemaker. The union hasn't reached your corner of town yet. Still, you whisper to the girl beside you when the foreman turns his back. She tells you about a worker who dropped a tray of matches once, how they ignited instantly, setting her apron aflame. She survived, barely. The scar still stretches from chin to collarbone, shiny and pink like melted wax. The others say she was lucky. Only half her face burned. Break time, if you're lucky, is a cold corner and a slice of stale bread. You eat with the same fingers you use to dip phosphorus. You try not to think about what's going into your stomach. No one drinks much water. It makes your teeth hurt worse. At the end of the shift, you brush yellow powder from your lap and stretch your cramped fingers. You count your boxes, 68 today. Enough for half a loaf and maybe a cracked egg. You trade stories on the way home, voices low, teeth aching in rhythm. Mary doesn't talk. Her cheek is swollen now. When you get home, you rinse your face and the water runs cloudy. You open your mouth and press on a molar. It wiggles. You stop pressing. There's talk of protests, strikes, some match girls walking out in London. You dream about it sometimes, marching through the streets, waving signs, yelling with the strength of lungs not yet full of poison. But you also dream of food on the table and a roof that doesn't leak. Next morning you go back. You dip and stack and whisper and bleed and swallow chemical dust with every breath. You pray quietly that the match in your hand isn't the one that finally sparks. Because the only thing more flammable than your product is your future. But here's the part no one tells you. Eventually, the protests do happen. Women and girls just like you do rise up. They form unions, they march, they force factories to switch to safer red phosphorus. It takes years, but change comes, and when it does, your burnt fingers helped light the fuse. You leave behind the ashes of the match factory and wander into the open air of a cobbled city morning. A sharp scent of vinegar and coal wafts past, and in the distance, a bell tolls 7 times. You are now a knocker-up. No, not that kind of knocking up. This is the 1800s, and alarm clocks are unreliable, expensive, or non-existent. People need to get to work, but they have no way to wake up on time. That's where you come in. Your tools, a long pole, sometimes bamboo, sometimes brass, with a wire or rubber tip and a pocket full of pebbles. Your mission, to get hundreds of sleepy workers out of bed before dawn without fail. No snooze button, no second chances. You wake bakers, mill workers, seamstresses, train conductors, lamplighters, and even police officers. You are the original human alarm clock, and you take it personally. Each client has their own time. Mrs. Turner needs waking at 4:15 sharp to knead dough, the Thomas boys. 5:05 exactly, or they'll miss their train. Old Mr. Swinton insists on 6:01 every day, even on Sundays. You know every window by heart. Some are 4 stories up, some sit behind tricky shutters, some have dogs that bark if you get too close. For the higher ones, you use a blowpipe and shoot dried peas at the glass. A light, tap, tap, tap. You do it until you see movement, usually a grumpy face and a wave. That's your signal to move on. It's a delicate craft, too soft, and they don't wake. Too loud, and neighbors complain. You walk fast, think faster, and have to remember a dozen addresses and wake times every day. No notebook, just memory and rhythm, and you don't dare miss a wake-up. If you do, someone loses wages, someone might get fired. One man missed his factory shift once and never hired you again. That loss still stings. You pride yourself on precision. You don't sleep through storms or snow or coughing fits. You walk in the dark, sometimes with only a lantern and the sound of your own steps for company. Some of your clients are kind. They leave tea at the window or nod at you from the street. Others treat you like a shadow, a necessary nuisance, a walking tick of the clock. But you know better. You see the city before it's fully awake, the lamplight flickering on puddles, the milkmen clattering bottles on porches, the way frost paints the window edges like lace. You're part of the city's heartbeat. Without you, everything runs late. Still, the job is vanishing. People are whispering about new alarm clocks with springs and bells that never fail. Some say electricity will change everything. You've seen shops selling pocket watches now too, more accurate, more affordable. Your list of clients is already shrinking. One boy said he didn't need you anymore. He had a clock radio. Clock radio. You don't know what that is, but it sounds like trouble. You start doing other jobs. Taking messages, running errands, selling buttons, but nothing feels quite the same as that early morning walk, the stillness before industry, the quiet authority of tapping someone into wakefulness. Then one day you hang up your stick. The same day, a large department store begins selling wind-up alarms at half price. It hurts more than you expected. Still, years later, when someone asks how the city kept time before machines, someone might smile and say, "There was this one woman, came by every morning at 5:03 without fail, tapped my window like clockwork, never missed a day." And they'll remember you, not as a machine, not as a relic, but as a human rhythm, a whisper between sleep and survival. You leave behind your tapping stick and the shrinking list of clients, stepping into a new morning as the city forgets your name. You wander not aimlessly but instinctively, following the scent of something burning, something roasting, something comforting. You turn a corner and enter a warm, smoky alley behind a bustling building. Roars of laughter and groans echo from inside. The air hums with masculine energy, sweat, metal, and roasted beans. You're now inside a spittoon boy's world, a role that's both revolting and essential in a time when chewing tobacco is more common than tea. You're hired by the management of the local gentlemen's club, a cigar lounge where men in thick coats gather to read newspapers, smoke pipes, drink whiskey, and spit. That's right, spit. You see, each heavy leather chair is paired with a polished brass or ceramic spittoon, a vessel into which wealthy men deposit globs of brown chewing tobacco and phlegm. And it's your job, your horrible, thankless, unavoidable job, to clean them. You wear gloves thick as winter mittens, though they never keep the stench out. You carry a rag, a tin pail, and a long-handled scoop. You move in silence, like a ghost. You wait for a man to nod or tap the spittoon with his foot, his silent signal that it's full. You pick it up carefully, carry it to your corner, and dump the contents into a larger barrel. You clean the bowl, polish the rim, replace it in exactly the same spot. No fanfare, no thank you. Sometimes not even eye contact. It's disgusting, but it pays. Better than sweeping streets or shining shoes. And you get tips if you're lucky and quick. Sometimes a man, softened by brandy, flips you a coin. Other times, they drop ash on your shoes or call you boy, even though you're nearly a man. But you learn things here, things others don't. You learn to read the room. Who's about to spit? Who's lying? Who's cheating at cards? Who just lost everything in a dice game but pretends they haven't? You recognize power not by words but by body language. You know who leans back when bluffing, who fiddles with their cuffs when hiding guilt. You also hear secrets. You're invisible, remember? So no one lowers their voice when you walk by. You hear deals being made, marriages being broken, companies being sold for a song. You could ruin lives with what you know, but you never say a word. You are the club's silent witness, trusted in a strange way, feared perhaps in another. Still, the work takes its toll. Some days you gag from the stench. Other days you hold your breath and pray no one's sick. One winter half the club gets influenza, and the spittoons are filled with more than tobacco. You clean anyway. Until one day, a man chokes and collapses into one of your clean bowls. He dies before the doctor arrives. After that, you leave. You can't look at brass the same way again. Years later, spittoons become relics. Chewing tobacco fades, hygiene rises. Smoking rooms get cleaner, quieter, lonelier. But once, you held 1,000 stories in your gloved hands. 1,000 unsaid truths, 1,000 invisible gestures, and you kept them all. You don't rest for long, you never do. The city turns like a clock and you move with its ticking. One gear feeds the next, one forgotten job leads to another. You find yourself drawn to the harbor, where the wind bites and the fog clings to your skin like regret. Ships groan against their moorings and gulls scream overhead like they've lost something precious. Here, you become a knocker-up. No, it's not what it sounds like. You carry no alarm clock because most people can't afford one. That's your job. You are the alarm clock. Your clients are factory workers, early train conductors, market women, seamstresses, anyone who must rise before the sun and can't risk oversleeping. You wake at 3 a.m., coat buttoned, eyes half open, and walk the same streets every morning. You memorize windows and times. Number 12, 4:10 a.m. Number 16, 4:15. The whole block by 4:30. No mistakes. One miss, and someone loses a day's wage. Or worse, you don't knock on doors. That would wake the whole house. You use a long stick, a light cane, or sometimes a pea shooter. Yes, a real one. You load it with dried peas and aim with surgeon's precision, tapping or pinging at the bedroom windows of your clients until they stir, curse, and pull back the curtains to wave you off. You move on. Tap, tap, tap. Another light goes on. You've never met most of them, never heard their voices, except the occasional muffled complaint through glass. But still, every morning, in the dark, in the damp, in the aching cold, you wake them. You are their first thought, their ghostly companion at dawn. You're never late. You can't be. Even when the snow swallows your boots, even when your hands freeze to the stick, even when your own body cries out for sleep, you don't wake yourself. Someone else does that, An older knocker up with a louder knock. It's a chain of alarms, human and precise. You're part of something strange and beautiful, a society of whisperers and window tappers, keeping the industrial world spinning. Then, as always, progress kills you. Alarm clocks become cheaper, more reliable, more personal. People stop hiring you. One by one, the windows go dark. They don't wave anymore. They don't need you. The stick becomes a walking cane. The pea shooter rusts in a drawer. And still, you find yourself waking before dawn, heart racing, brain scanning windows and times that no longer matter. You were once the guardian of morning, the shepherd of sleep's end. Now, you're just another person trying to rise on time. You wander into a quieter part of town where the buildings lean in like old friends sharing secrets. Here, the streets are cobbled, the chimneys squat, and every corner holds a memory. You walk slowly now. Time feels thicker here like syrup. You become a leech collector. The name alone makes you shiver, but someone had to do it. Medicine once believed that illness lived in the blood. Too much blood, the wrong kind of blood, blood in the wrong place. Whatever the ailment, the solution was often the same: bleeding. Doctors needed leeches, so you, brave soul, harvest them. You wade into bogs, swamps, and shallow ponds, barefoot and bare-legged, because leeches cling better to skin than cloth. You stand still for hours like a statue, letting the slick, greedy creatures attach themselves. When your legs are full, writhing with life, you peel them off one by one and drop them into jars. They squirm and pulse, black and shiny like oil made flesh. You get paid by the dozen. But it's a dangerous job. You lose blood every day. You feel weak, lightheaded. Some collectors, especially women and children, grow pale and faint often. Others become infected. You've seen friends lose legs or lives. Still, the apothecaries pay well. Leeches are in high demand. Rich folk use them for headaches, surgeons for surgeries, dentists for aching gums. And so, you stand in water that smells like rot, letting creatures feed on you. It's not glamorous, but it's honest and necessary. Eventually, science moves on. Germ theory rises. Bleeding falls out of fashion. Doctors scoff at the sight of leeches. You look at the jars, once full, now dusty, and you wonder if maybe the leeches knew more than the doctors did. Because when they sucked your blood, they left you calm, quiet, lighter. It wasn't just pain they took, it was something deeper. Maybe they were healers in disguise. But now, you are jobless again. The swamps are silent. You move on. Through alleys and memory, to the next forgotten task, the next life you'll borrow. You leave the damp wetlands behind and make your way toward the hills, where smoke curls from cottages and stone fences guard long-forgotten secrets. It's here that you take up your next mantle, the Sin Eater. Yes, the name is as haunting as the role. When someone dies, especially someone poor, unknown, or unloved, there's a fear their soul might linger, that their sins might weigh them down, or worse, drag them into the dark. Enter you. You are summoned quietly, often under cover of night. You are not welcome in the daylight. Yours is a hidden trade, both sacred and shameful. They place a loaf of bread on the chest of the deceased, a mug of ale beside the bed. You arrive, weather-beaten, silent. You sit alone, then you eat. You consume the bread, drink the ale. It is believed, truly believed, that the dead's sins pass into the food, and that by eating you absorb their transgressions, their lies, their crimes, their blasphemies. You take them in. You are a living vessel of the impure, a walking confession booth with no forgiveness in return. Sometimes a coin is left for you, sometimes just a crust. No one looks you in the eye. You are feared, pitied, necessary. You attend no church, for they would never let you in. The priest shuns you. The town gossips about you. Yet when death comes calling, it's your name they whisper, because everyone wants to believe their loved one left clean. And someone must carry the stain. You've eaten for criminals, adulterers, traitors. You've eaten for babies, for mothers, for soldiers. The bread never tastes different, but sometimes you swear the air changes. The moment you swallow, a heaviness clings to your chest, like grief made solid. You try not to think about how many sins you've swallowed, how many unspoken regrets now sit inside you like stones in a riverbed. You never speak of the names, never judge, never flinch. You just eat. One day, though, the practice dies out. The church bans it. Science mocks it. The new generation forgets it. No one wants to believe that sins can pass through bread or that a stranger could carry away damnation. You're no longer needed, just a relic of fear and folklore. Still, sometimes when you eat alone, in silence, you pause. You feel something heavy slide down your throat, and you wonder, just wonder whose sin you've swallowed this time. You walk westward now, where the land opens up into golden fields swaying like the sea. In the distance, a low rhythmic thumping fills the air, like a heartbeat made of wood and iron. You follow it, drawn in by the sound, until you find yourself in front of a long, low building where people move in precise, repeated motions. Here, you become a knocker-upper. No, not that kind. Before alarm clocks, before buzzing phones and digital screens, someone had to wake the world up. That someone was you. You carry a long pole, often tipped with wire or a pebble. In some towns, it's a blowpipe and a pouch of dried peas. Your job? To wake people up at the hour they request. You tap on windows, lightly for the baker at 3 a.m., harder for the grocer at 4:30. You know which pane to hit for each worker, which corner not to touch so the wife doesn't wake. You're trusted more than clocks. You're punctual, unfailingly so. In factory towns, you walk your rounds in the darkness, lanterns swinging from your hip, breath fogging the air. You're the first one awake, always. You knock. They rise. The city stirs. You've never overslept, never missed a beat. If you did, dozens of people would be late, punished, or docked pay. You carry that responsibility in your bones. But no one wakes you. That's the irony. Your time is guessed, your sleep interrupted by instinct and trust. You nap in patches, you live in twilight, you eat in silence. People nod to you on the street but rarely speak. They rely on you, but they don't really see you. You're just part of the system, until clocks get cheaper, until wind-up alarms become common. Suddenly, you're unnecessary. The knocks go unanswered. You stop carrying the pole, you walk, but without a purpose. You wonder if they remember how you stood outside in the rain or in the snow or during storms, tapping gently on the pane so a father could feed his family or a girl could earn her week's wage. You fade. But once, you were the reason the day began. You were time itself, and no one thanked you for it. The road takes a sharp turn now, upward and narrow into colder winds and stone villages clinging to the edges of cliffs. And here, under a slanted roof in the shadow of a towering chimney, you become a fuller. It's a job few remember. Yet in the age of wool, before modern detergents or industry, someone had to cleanse and strengthen the fabric to prepare it for wear, for warmth, for life. That someone was you. And the method, well, it was unpleasant. You take freshly woven woolen cloth, thick and greasy with natural lanolin, and you place it into large vats. You mix it with water, with earth, with fuller's earth, a kind of clay, and sometimes, yes, truly, with stale urine. It's called chamber lye. Saved from households, collected by the bucket, bought by the barrel, rich in ammonia, powerful enough to strip oils and clean the fibers. You roll up your trousers, and then you step in, you stomp, for hours, barefoot. Through the cold, acrid-smelling mixture, pounding rhythmically, working the fabric until it thickens, until it tightens, until it becomes strong and warm and able to survive the elements. Your legs are raw, your lungs burn, but you don't stop. Because cloth means survival, clothing means dignity. Your labor, though invisible, transforms something scratchy and loose into something weatherproof and valuable. People wear coats you made better. Cloaks, tunics, caps, all fuller softened. They don't know your name. They may not even know your job exists. But they feel your work every time they pull cloth tight against the wind. You return home sore, soaked to the knees, reeking of ammonia and earth. But tomorrow, you'll stomp again. Until one day, new methods arrive. Industrial machines, chemical washes, steam-powered processes, and the job of the fuller disappears. No one misses the smell, the raw feet, the relentless pounding. But something is lost. Something in the human connection to cloth. To the idea that what touches your skin once passed through someone else's hands, feet, and sweat. You step out of the vat for the last time, the wool is soft, and no one will ever know why. The path turns quiet now, whispering through misty fields and between hedgerows bristling with early frost. A pale sun rises over low cottages, and in one of them, you take your final forgotten form. You are a leech collector, not a healer, not a doctor, not a butcher or a farmer. You are the one who supplies the medicine, the leeches. In the 18th and 19th centuries, they are in high demand. Doctors prescribe them for nearly everything: fevers, infections, headaches, hysteria, even bad moods. Bloodletting is the cure, and that means leeches, and that means you. You rise before the sun. Tie your skirts high or roll up your trousers. Grab a jar, a sack, a stick. Then you wade into the marsh. Slowly, quietly. You know where they hide. The shadows under reeds, the still pockets of water, the slippery edges where the light doesn't reach. And sometimes, to attract them faster, you let them feed on you. You stand still in the mud, feeling the faint tug and latch of dozens of tiny mouths on your skin. One by one they drink, each one growing fat and black and full. Then you pluck them off, drop them into jars, seal the top, sell them by the dozen to surgeons, barbers, pharmacists, apothecaries. You are essential and expendable. No gloves, no boots, no antiseptic. Your legs are always covered in bites, open wounds, infections. You get sick, weak, but you keep collecting. In some places, the job is left mostly to women and children. Their smaller frames more agile in the water, their skin more delicate, more inviting to the leeches. Your pay, a few coins per dozen. Sometimes not even that. Sometimes you're paid in fish. Or nothing at all, just the promise of next time. But without you, there's no medicine. Without you, the cure cannot happen. Until, of course, the science changes. Until doctors begin to question the value of bleeding someone for every illness. Until antiseptics rise and sanitation. Until leeches become outdated or even laughable. You're not thanked. You're just no longer needed. You look at your scarred legs, your bitten ankles. You close your last jar. You walk out of the swamp for the last time, and no one tells your story again. But tonight, someone finally does. You do. Because you've walked through time, through trades and toil and forgotten lives. You've become the hands that built the world, the feet that stomped cloth, the fingers that pinched leeches, the pole that knocked on windows, the breath that lit lamps, the sweat behind elegance, the shadow behind industry. And now it's time to sleep. The sky darkens again, the road fades, the voices of the forgotten grow quiet. But they smile, because you remembered. Good night.